Hello, everybody. This is a meteorologist Wright Dobbs from the National Weather Service office here in Tallahassee. We'll be getting started in a few minutes here. I'm just going to do a little bit of an audio check. If you guys want to put in the comments if you can hear me, that will help us check that our audio is working, and we'll be all set to go here in a few minutes. So just comment below if you can hear what I'm saying. Again, we're checking the comments right now. Just go ahead and comment if you can hear me. Alrighty, that's good to hear. Thanks, Phyllis, for responding back to me. So we'll go ahead and going to go on mute for a few minutes here, and we'll go ahead and get started to talk about what Elsa will bring to the parts of the Northeast Gulf and southern parts of Georgia here. We'll start at 8:30. All right, everybody. It's 8:30 here at the National Weather Service in Tallahassee. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about what we can expect through the overnight hours tonight and into portions of tomorrow for the Florida Big Bend and into parts of southern Georgia. All right. So currently, looking at the latest radar imagery, this is radar imagery out of Tampa. So this area is covered by the National Weather Service office in Tampa. But currently, Elsa, what the biggest change happened at 8 o'clock with the latest National Hurricane Center advisory is Elsa was upgraded to a hurricane. So what this isn't going to mean too much, at least for impacts across our forecast area. And for a lot of our forecast area, which stops at the Dixie-Levy County line and goes up north of Dixie County and Lafayette and Madison County, this isn't really going to change what we're expecting for our area too much. This is going to be more of a concern for areas like Levy County, Citrus County, and parts of those where Elsa is forecast to make landfall sometime tomorrow morning into the early afternoon hours. So right now, Elsa is going to, again, Elsa is moving north, so we'll have to see what it's going to do over the next few hours to see where that ultimate landfall location will be. But the thing is, we don't want folks to focus on where exactly the storm's going to make landfall. What we want folks to be doing is preparing for a reasonable worst case scenario. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here, because hurricanes and any kind of tropical systems, there's always errors in the forecast, and we want to make sure that folks are preparing in case those errors occur. So for example, with Elsa, because there's a lot of wind shear right now that's bringing a lot of the impacts from Elsa to the eastern side of the storm. So one thing to watch out for through the next 24 to 36 hours is, what if Elsa moves a little bit west of forecast? Then areas, right, say if Elsa has a landfall location near Cedar Key, that means areas to the west of there, while they might have a little bit more impacts than they were expecting. That's why we want folks to be preparing for different outcomes with these hurricanes, and we're going to tell you what you should prepare for in this Facebook Live broadcast. All right, so let's go to what we got for you guys this evening. All right, so the current situation overview for Hurricane Elsa. As I said, the latest 8 p.m. advisory has it just west of Fort Myers and Naples, and it's moving north at around 14 miles per hour. The latest forecast hasn't changed too much with regards to track, but it does have landfall potentially in the southeast Florida Big Bend into the northern parts of the nature coast of Florida. Currently, that's around the Cedar Key area. But again, like I mentioned a minute or two ago, we don't want folks to focus on the specific location where it's going to make landfall. We want folks to be preparing for potential impacts. That way, if the storm does shift area, if it shifts to the west of where it's forecast or it shifts to the east, well, if it shifts to the east, at least you were prepared for that possible outcome. But what if it shifts to the west? You need to make sure that you're ready for that potential. And we're going to get into what some of those upper end potentials could be. So again, the changes with this advisory is Elsa is now a hurricane with winds of 75 miles an hour. And with taking note of that, the potential for hurricane conditions have increased across portions of Dixie County and across extreme southern portions of Taylor County, pretty much along the Steinhatchee River. So the biggest thing is last minute preparations need to be completed by this evening. And the reason we say that is because we're going to start seeing some of those, when we start seeing those outer rain bands move through, and maybe some of the more steady rain on the northern side of Elsa, that's going to start moving in to parts of southeast Florida Big Bend early Wednesday. So again, you want to make sure your preparations for this storm are completed by this evening. That way, if there are those dangerous conditions tomorrow in your area, you're not scrambling and putting yourself in harm's way to get out of the storm, or maybe to take care of those last minute preparations. So make sure you get some of those done this evening. Again, conditions are expected to worsen across much of the area on Wednesday morning. So what are some of these impacts we can expect there? And we'll kind of get into that here in the next few minutes. As for wind, well, sustained tropical storm force winds are expected, at least for where we have especially across portions of Taylor County and south. Those are where tropical storm force winds are pretty much, they're expected. But because of the possibility for Elsa to become a hurricane, which we saw today, and the potential for those hurricane impacts, much of these areas are currently right now in a hurricane warning. So, the portions of the areas that are going to receive, or that could receive, hurricane conditions are most likely confined to the coastal areas of Florida. But we want folks to make sure that they're prepared for that in case you get those strong wind gusts up to hurricane force. So make sure you're prepared for that. Another thing we want to make sure folks are ready for is storm surge. Currently, storm surge, the upper end of storm surge estimates could see anywhere from 3 to 5 feet in parts of the eastern Appalachee Bay. Now, one thing to note because Elsa is a very sheared storm, not everywhere along the coast is going to see those 3 to 5 foot of surge. But the thing is, if Elsa does take a more westward track, if you didn't prepare for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, you could be in trouble. So we want to make sure you're taking the most recent warnings into consideration in your preparations. As for rainfall, well, the very sheer nature of Elsa, with lots of the rainfall to the east, we're only looking at 2 to 4 inches of widespread rainfall, especially east of Tallahassee and east of Tifton. But isolated locations could see up to 6, maybe as high as 8 in very extreme circumstances of rainfall. So that could cause some flooding on local rivers, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. And lastly, with any tropical system, we are looking at the potential for a few tornadoes. That's usually always the case, especially on the right side of a storm in relation to its movement. Again, impacts could begin as early as Wednesday morning. For Elsa, it's strengthened over the last 12 to 24 hours, and with the latest advisory at 8 o'clock, it is now a hurricane. On the right is the latest radar imagery as well. So again, you can see that northward progress of Elsa, and we are seeing one of the outer rain bands from Elsa move through across portions of our forecast area. And as that moves through, we could see a little bit of a break tonight, but then we'll start to see those conditions fill in early Wednesday morning, and then obviously conditions are going to be worsening through the day on Wednesday. Here are the current tropical storm warnings and watches and hurricane warnings. So right now there are no hurricane watches in effect, but there are hurricane warnings, and most of those for our forecast area are across our marine waters, across the southeast Florida Big Bend, and the hurricane warnings are confined mostly just to our coastal areas. Now, while it is possible some areas might not see those sustained winds of hurricane force, it's definitely still a possibility, and folks need to be preparing for that. So that's why we have a hurricane warning out for those coastal areas and our marine zones just off the Dixie County coastline. As you go further inland, Elsa will, when it makes landfall tomorrow, it is expected to decrease in intensity, but there are still the chance for tropical storm force winds to extend well inward, to parts of I-10 and to I-75 and even further northeast into National Weather Service Jacksonville's area. So looking at these potential wind threats. So again, when I started off this broadcast, I was mentioning that these are the impacts people should be preparing for. So in these yellow areas here, pretty much from Tallahassee, Tifton, and west or east to Valdosta and Perry, generally we have the potential for wind from 39 to 57 miles per hour. So that wind is good enough to cause maybe some minor damage to some roof siding. Could cause a few tree limbs to come down. Maybe some trees, some weakened trees could come down. So you definitely want to make sure, if you have a weakened trees in your yard, you might want to make sure you're moving your personal belongings out away from under those trees. Maybe if you have a weakened tree on your property that's near your house, maybe you should consider staying away from that side of the house in case the tree falls down on that part of your house. So make sure you're making those precautions right now. If we look at the orange area, that's where we can see the potential for strong tropical storm force winds. That's pretty much from Perry and Valdosta, and you go east in inland portions of Dixie and Lafayette counties. So sometimes with those, we can have with the stronger winds, some roads could become impassable if any large trees come down on the roads in these areas. There are gonna be scattered power outages in these areas. At least that's what folks should be preparing for. It might not be as widespread, but it's definitely something folks should be ready for. So you should have those lists of supplies for at least 3 days. But at minimum at minimum, emergency managers and meteorologists recommend 7 days of supplies to get through any tropical systems. And then lastly, in the red areas here on the extreme coastal areas of Dixie County and offshore, we have the potential for 74 to 110 miles an hour wind. And basically that's the potential for the Category 1 hurricane force winds. So basically in the red area, we could see a lot more power outages. They could be a little bit more widespread. So there is a potential you could see power outages last a few more days in the red areas than in the orange areas. And that's what we want folks to make sure they're preparing for. It's not necessarily that we'll see those impacts, but you need to be ready for those impacts. In addition to the wind, one of the things we're pretty concerned about is storm surge. The Appalachia Bay is a well-known storm surge prone area, and it's very it doesn't take too much to bring those elevated inundations with storm surge. So you can see here across all parts east of the Osceola River, we have the potential for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. So if you're living along those marshy areas and those coastal areas on the southeast Florida Big Bend, you need to be prepared for water potentially blocking coastal roads. You could see some minor inundation of non-elevated structures along the beach. And the thing is, a lot of this surge is going to be moving in late tonight into early Wednesday. And one thing that we want to note is the latest forecast for Elsa did slow it down a little bit, and across much of the southeast Florida Big Bend, high tide is going to be occurring at roughly around noon. And the thing is, if Elsa goes a little bit further west of forecast, that could definitely bring those upper end of these 3 to 5 foot ranges across southeast Big Bend. So we want to make sure folks are ready for those 3 to 5 feet possibilities of storm surge, because once you get above 3 feet of storm surge, that's considered life-threatening, and you aren't going to be able to use your car to get out of any areas that are inundated and stuff like that. So make sure if you are going to take action against storm surge, it needs to be pretty much completed tonight and at the latest by early Wednesday morning, because as we go through the day Wednesday, those water levels are going to rise, especially along and east of the center of Hurricane Elsa. Further west from the Osceola River to the Ocklawackney River, we got storm surge values of around 2 to 4 feet of inundation. And that's what is possible. Not necessarily that we're expecting 2 to 4 feet, but you need to be ready for 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, because if this track goes further west, all of a sudden 2 to 4 feet becomes a real possibility in these areas where we have a storm surge watch. And then as you go further west, the strong and elevated eastward flow from Elsa could generate up to 1 to 2 feet of surge from locations east of Indian Pass to the Ocklawackney River. So that can cause some minor inundation of immediate roads along the immediate coast. So a lot of areas I like to think about this is the Alligator Point Road and portions of Franklin County. I mean, it's a small possibility, but folks should be ready for that. For the rainfall parts of Elsa, Elsa is not going to bring as much rainfall to the area as what areas we'll see further east of us. But again, if the center does track further west of where it's currently forecast to make landfall, which is around Cedar Key area, we could see those rainfall amounts climb up in portions of Cross City, Perry, and Valdosta. And generally, we're expecting 2 to 4 inches of rainfall, and isolated areas could receive up to 6 inches, mostly near the center of Elsa. This rainfall is expected to cause rises on some rivers, at least to action stage, but minor flooding is definitely a possibility, especially if the heaviest rainfall falls on the saturated river basins such as the Withlacoochee River and the Osceola River basins. And because of that increased rainfall potential, we do have a flood watch that's in effect for most locations east of Thomasville and Tifton. And if you're in these areas, just make sure you keep an eye on the latest forecast, and if you see any flooded roadways, don't drive across them, and respect the barricades that our local officials and law enforcement put out to protect you. And again, this is the graphic. In the yellow areas, we want folks to be there's a minor chance for some flooding rainfall, and then in the orange areas, we have a moderate chance for flooding rainfall, and that pretty much corresponds with where we have our flood watch. And lastly, we are looking at the potential for a few tornadoes, as with any tropical system. The greatest chance is going to be mostly east of our forecast area. You can see how the probabilities and the potential is only for a few tornadoes. But again, if Elsa does take a further west track, we could see a few more tornadoes, especially in parts of Cross City, Perry, and up north into Valdosta and other parts of Georgia. Now, if we do see any tornadoes, they are going to be they form relatively quick, and often the way tropical tornadoes form, they can form with very little warning. So if we do end up putting any tornado warnings out tonight or tomorrow, make sure you already know where to go in your house, so when you get that warning on your phone, you can take action right away. And this tornado threat's probably going to begin early Wednesday morning and persist through the day Wednesday as Elsa moves north towards the area. Again, that's about all I got for right now, but the biggest changes is Elsa has strengthened to a hurricane with this update, and we do have the potential for hurricane conditions, and those have increased across portions of Dixie County and southern Taylor counties along the coast. Last-minute preparations for Hurricane Elsa need to be complete by this evening, and at the latest, there's going to be limited time Wednesday morning to get any completions done, especially if you live in any surge-prone areas along the Dixie County coastline or other portions of the Florida southeast coast. So, again, conditions are going to worsen early Wednesday morning, and we want folks to be ready for that. So that's all I got right now, and we're going to, I'll go ahead and look at the comments a little bit, and if you guys have any questions, we'll try to get to a few of those here in a little bit. So I guess one comment we see here from Christina. She says, I'm talking a lot about tracks and if they shift west, like we're expecting that to happen. We're not expecting the track to shift west of where it's at now. But the thing is, I want to stress is that any tropical systems they always have some sort of uncertainty in their forecast. And the thing is, we want folks to be ready for that uncertainty. We've seen it with all kinds of storms and potential uncertainties. Going back way to 2004, Hurricane Charlie took a right turn that many folks did not expect. So that's why we're stressing prepare for some of these impacts, but it's not necessarily that they'll happen. Again, we'll go back to the impacts. Folks should be preparing for hurricane conditions along the immediate coastline in Dixie County. Now, will they receive hurricane force winds? We're not sure. I mean, we have that forecast, but they definitely should be preparing for it. All right, so again, yeah, similar question, addressing that. Someone asked, is there a chance of Elsa drifting more west for Tallahassee? That chance is very low, but I mean, you can see here in this forecast for the wind threats that even if it does shift west a little bit, areas in Tallahassee still only have the potential for low-end tropical storm force winds. Again, that's what these forecasts that we give right here and these graphics, they're safety margins. So these are things you should be preparing for. It takes into effect all the uncertainties and track. So if it does go a little bit more west, you're still going to be prepared for that, and you won't have to take any last-minute preparations. So I'm still monitoring the latest in the questions here. If you have any questions, last-minute questions from Elsa, we're done with the briefing, but we'll take a few questions and then we'll sign off for the evening because we got things will be getting busy for us here. Alrighty, I am not seeing anything in the comments right now, so we're going to go ahead and sign off, and we thank you guys for tuning in. Please make sure to stay up to date on the latest forecasts and conditions. You can do that on our website at weather.gov/Tallahassee, or for the latest hurricane forecasts as Elsa evolves, you can go to hurricanes.gov and you can see the latest forecasts and conditions. We also want to remind folks, as conditions evolve over the next 24 hours, please, if you get any reports, send us that way. It can help us stay up to date on what's going on. So you can do that. You can send us reports on Twitter. Just tag us what you see. So be sure to see, hey, down trees in Dixie County, and then you can tag us at NWS Tallahassee, and then we can make sure we'll get that report, and make sure to include any pictures if you have it, and most of all, be sure to send us reports safely. We don't want you to put yourself in harm's way to relay a weather report. Your safety is the utmost priority. Again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. That's all we got here. We'll have additional updates as things with Elsa evolve through the next 24 to 36 hours. Thanks for tuning in.